Book 6, Operations near the Rhine. Part 1, the Treveri routed, 53 BC. 1. Caesar had many reasons, however, for expecting still more serious disturbances before long. He therefore charged 3 of his generals, Marcus Silanus, Gaius Antistius Reginus, and Titus Sextius, with the duty of raising fresh troops. He also sent a message to Pompey, who, though vested as proconsul with military command, was remaining for political reasons in the neighbourhood of Rome, requesting him to mobilize the recruits from northern Italy whom he had sworn in during his consulship, and to send them out to him. Caesar considered it very important, with a view to making a permanent impression upon the tribesmen, to let it be seen that the manpower of Italy was sufficient not only to repair speedily any loss sustained in the field, but actually to increase the size of the expeditionary force. Pompey acceded to this request from motives of patriotism as well as friendship, and Caesar's officers promptly enlisted further recruits, so that before the end of the winter 3 legions were formed and brought to Gaul, making double the number of cohorts lost under Sabinus. This large reinforcement, and the speed with which it was effected, showed what Roman organization and resources were capable of. 2. After the death of Indutiomarus related above, his command was transferred by the Treveri to members of his family, who persisted in trying to obtain the support of the nearest German tribes by promises of money. Failing in this, they made overtures to more distant tribes, a number of which consented. The alliance was confirmed by an exchange of oaths, and hostages were given as security for the payment of the money. Ambiorix also was admitted as a partner to the league. Caesar was informed of these intrigues, and saw warlike preparations going on all around. The Nervii, Atuatucae, and Menapii, together with all the tribes of German origin on the west bank of the Rhine, were in arms. The Senones refused to attend at his bidding, and were concerting plans with the Carnutes and others of their neighbours, and the Treveri were sending embassy after embassy to obtain German aid. He therefore decided that he must take the field in advance of the usual season. 3. Accordingly, before the winter was over, he assembled the 4 nearest legions and made an unexpected attack on the country of the Nervii. Before they could either concentrate their forces or flee, a large number of cattle and prisoners were captured and handed over as booty to the soldiers. The country was ravaged, and the Nervii forced to surrender and give hostages. After this quick success, Caesar took the legions back into winter quarters. In the early spring, he convoked the usual Gallic council, which was attended by all those summoned except the Senones, Carnutes, and the Treveri. He regarded their non-appearance as a first step towards an armed revolt, and in order to make it clear that he considered its suppression of paramount importance, he decided to transfer the meeting to Lutetia, a town of the Parisii. They inhabited a territory adjoining that of the Senones, and a generation before had united with them to form one state, but they appear to have had no hand in the present policy of the Senones. After announcing his decision from the platform in his camp, Caesar started with his legions the same day and made his way by forced marches to the country of the Senones. 4. On learning of his approach, Acco, the ringleader of the conspiracy, ordered the population to gather in their strongholds. Before they had time to complete this operation, they heard that the Romans were at hand. The Senones had no choice but to abandon their project and send envoys to ask Caesar's pardon. These were introduced by the Aedui, under whose protection their tribe had been from ancient times. Caesar willingly pardoned them at the request of the Aedui, and accepted their excuses, for he thought that the summer should be devoted to the impending war, not wasted in holding an inquest. He ordered them, however, to provide 100 hostages, whom he entrusted to the custody of the Aedui. The Carnutes, too, sent envoys and hostages while Caesar was in the district, pleading their cause with the support of the Remi, whose dependents they were, and received the same reply. Caesar then completed the business of the council and requisitioned cavalry from the various tribes. 5. Now that this part of Gaul was tranquilized, Caesar devoted all his energies to the war against the Treveri and Ambiorix. He bade Carinus accompany him with the cavalry of the Senones, lest his hasty temper or the hatred that he had earned should cause trouble in the tribe. Then, since he felt certain that Ambiorix did not intend to fight a battle, he cast about to discover what other plans he might have. Close to the Eburones and protected by a continuous line of marshes and forests dwelled the Menapii, the only Gallic people who had never sent envoys to Caesar to sue for peace. He knew that Ambiorix was united to them by ties of hospitality, and also that, through the agency of the Treveri, he had formed an alliance with the Germans. He thought it advisable to deprive Ambiorix of these allies before attacking him directly, for fear desperation should make him hide among the Menapii or join the tribes beyond the Rhine. Therefore, after sending the baggage of the entire army to Labienus's camp in the country of the Treveri and ordering 2 legions to proceed thereto, he started himself for the territory of the Menapii with 5 legions in light marching order. The Menapii did not collect any troops, but relying on the protection of the terrain, took refuge with all their belongings in the forests and marshes. 6. Caesar put Fabius and the quaestor Marcus Crassus in command of detachments, and the 3 columns advanced with the aid of hastily constructed causeways, burning farms and villages, and taking a large number of cattle and prisoners. By this means the Menapii were compelled to send envoys to sue for peace. Caesar took the hostages they offered and told them that he would treat them as enemies if they admitted Ambiorix or his agents into their territory. With this warning, he left Commius, the Atrebatian, with a force of cavalry to keep the Menapii under surveillance, while he marched against the Treveri. 7. Meanwhile, the Treveri had collected large forces of infantry and cavalry and were preparing to attack Labienus and the single legion which was wintering in their territory. They were within 2 days' march of his camp when they heard of the arrival of the 2 legions dispatched to him by Caesar, and, encamping at a distance of 15 miles, they decided to wait for reinforcements from the Germans. Apprised of their intention, Labienus hoped that their imprudence would give him some opportunity of bringing them to action. He left 5 cohorts to guard the baggage, marched against the enemy with the other 25 and a strong force of cavalry, and entrenched a camp a mile away from them. Between the 2 camps was a river with steep banks, difficult to cross. Labienus had no intention of crossing it himself and did not think the enemy would. The Gauls' hope of being reinforced was increasing daily, and Labienus purposely let the soldiers hear him say that, since the Germans were said to be approaching, he would not jeopardize their safety and his own by remaining, but would break up the camp next morning at dawn. This remark was soon reported to the enemy, since among the large number of Gallic horsemen it was only natural that there should be some who sympathized with their fellow countrymen's cause. At night, Labienus summoned the military tribunes and first-grade centurions and explained his plans. Then, to help in making the enemy think they were afraid, he ordered the camp to be broken up with more noise and disturbance than is customary with Roman armies, and so made his departure resemble a flight. This also was reported to the Gauls by their patrols before daybreak, for the camps were very close together. 8. They urged one another not to let the hoped-for prize slip from their grasp. To wait for German aid when the Romans were panic-stricken would mean unnecessary delay, and with such a large army it would be disgraceful to shrink from attacking a mere handful of men, especially men who were running away and hampered by baggage. Accordingly, when the rearguard of the Roman column had barely got outside the entrenchment, they boldly began to cross the river and joined battle in an unfavourable position. Labienus had expected this, and enticed them all across by continuing to advance slowly, keeping up the pretense that he was marching away, Then, sending the baggage a short distance ahead and parking it on a piece of rising ground, he said to the soldiers, "Here is your chance. You have got the enemy where you wanted them, in a bad position, where they are not free to maneuver. Fight as bravely under me as you often have under the commander-in-chief. Imagine that he is here, watching the battle in person." With these words, he bade the units turn to face the enemy and form a line of battle, sent a few squadrons of cavalry to protect the baggage, and posted the rest on the flanks. The men at once raised a shout and launched their spears. The enemy were amazed to see the enemy that they thought to be in flight advancing to the attack. They had not the courage to face its charge. Directly the lines met, they turned tail and made for the nearest woods. Labienus hunted them down with his cavalry, killing many of them and taking a number of prisoners, and a few days later had recovered his hold over the tribe. For the Germans who were coming to aid them returned home when they found the Treveri routed. The relatives of Indutiomarus, who had instigated the revolt, fled the country and went along with the Germans. King Getorix, who had remained loyal right from the outset, was invested with civil and military control of the tribe. Part 2. The Second Crossing of the Rhine, 53 BC. 9. After marching from the country of the Menapii to that of the Treveri, Caesar determined to cross the Rhine for two reasons. First, because the Germans had sent the Treveri reinforcements to use against him. Secondly, to prevent Ambiorix finding an asylum in Germany. He therefore proceeded to build a bridge a little above the place where he had crossed before. As the method of construction was familiar to the soldiers from the previous occasion, they were able by energetic efforts to complete the task in a few days. Leaving a strong guard on the Gallic side of the bridge to prevent any sudden rising on the part of the Treveri, he led across the remainder of his forces, including the cavalry. The Ubii, who had previously given hostages and submitted, sent envoys to clear themselves by explaining that they had not broken their word. The aid sent to the Treveri had not come from their state. They begged him to spare them and not to let an indiscriminate animosity against the Germans make the innocent suffer for the guilty. If he wanted more hostages, they should be given. On investigating the matter, he found that the reinforcements had been sent by the Suebi. He therefore accepted the Ubii's explanation and made careful inquiry about the routes leading to the territory of the Suebi. 10. A few days later, Caesar was told by the Ubii that the Suebi were concentrating all their forces and calling upon their subject tribes to furnish contingents of infantry and cavalry. Thereupon, he arranged for a supply of grain, selected a suitable site for a camp, and directed the Ubii to remove their cattle and transfer all their possessions from the fields into their strongholds, hoping that the ignorant and uncivilized Germans might be induced by shortage of food to fight a battle on unequal terms. He also told the Ubii to keep sending scouts into Suebic territory and find out what the enemy were about. The Ubii carried out these instructions, and a few days later reported that, on the receipt of reliable information about the Roman army, all the Suebi had retired with the whole of their forces, and those which they had raised from their allies, to the farthest extremity of their country, where there was an immense forest called Bacanis, stretching far into the interior, and forming a natural barrier between the Suebi and the Cherusci, which prevented them from raiding and damaging each other's territory. On the edge of this forest, they said, the Suebi had resolved to await the arrival of the Romans.